of the Department of Mathematics and Statistics at Cebu Technological University main campus. He earned his BS in Statistics in CTU main campus under a CHED scholarship and later completed his Master of Education in Mathematics at the University of the Philippines, Cebu. He holds a Doctor of Philosophy in Education, major in Research and Evaluation from Cebu Normal University under the CHED CCUP Scholarship Program. So our resource speaker is often invited to speak about statistics and research with several local and, of course, international research presentations and publications. He has received awards such as Best Paper and Best Presenter, and his research interests include mathematics education, social sciences, time series forecasting, and instrumentation. So let us all welcome, virtually but warmly, Dr. Robert J. N. Anko. Good morning, Doc.
Morning, Sir Jay.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. Good morning, Dr. Gador. Good morning, Dr. Baguio. I don't know if Dr. Un is around in the meeting room. Anyway, good morning, everyone.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, Doc.
Morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning,
Good
sir.
morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Morning, Doc.
Can I start?
Good morning, Doc. Thank you for having us for today, Doc. So, would you like to share your screen, Doc, for your presentation, Doc?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Doc.
Can I have a thumbs up if my screen is visible on your end? Thank you. All right. Is my screen visible, Doxan?
Yes, very much visible, sir. And we can also hear you. Thank you very
Oh,
much.
yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
All right. Uh, it's been a gloomy uh week, no? So anyway, good morning, everyone, and thank you for the invitation, Dr. Gador. And I am very much pressured, by the way, with the topic because I'm into research, but specific more of the into English language teaching is quite a challenge because I really have to contextualize my talk on this particular topic. Anyway, I'll be sharing you some highlights in doing theory generation as well as theory validation. If you have noticed, in the master's level, we really are up to the theory validation. But once you reach na in your PhD level, the level na is more of the theory generation. It's you who will be generating your own theory. In the master's level, the theory is already there. Your job is to validate the existing theory. However, in our talk this morning, I'll be sharing to you how to generate a theory as well as how to validate your theory. So this is a fusion or a marriage of the few ideas and on really how to generate a theory as well as how to validate your own theory. Disclaimer lang, the topic actually is quite boring because we will be talking more of the axioms. We'll be talking more of the prepositions, and we will be talking about the hypothesis. I have heard earlier that they mentioned about hypothesis testing, whether the hypothesis being generated is valid or whatsoever. In our case this morning or this webinar, we are talking more. We are talking. We will be talking the three: the axioms, the prepositions, and hypothesis. Hopefully, you are quite familiar with these three terms because these are quite technical, especially in doing theory generation as well as theory validation. All right, allow me to proceed with the outline. Of course, before we jump into the theory generation as well as theory validation, of course, there's a really need to review some basic concepts of the qualitative and quantitative research because we cannot proceed with the theory generation and theory validation without knowledge in doing quanti and doing quali. Because I don't know if in your curriculum, uh, a prerequisite supposedly prior to enrolling to theory generation or theory validation, you really have to enroll qualitative or quantitative courses because these two courses are these are foundational courses prior to enrolling theory generation or theory development. All right. Also, I'll be sharing to you some software that are essential in doing quantitative and qualitative research or even mixed method in validating your own theory. All right. Since you have talked about qualitative and quantitative earlier, it's I think time to assess yourselves whether you are familiar with these terms. You may unmute yourselves na lang siguro no para interactive ang atong discussion. If you say close-ended, is it more into quantitative or qualitative side? Or you may use actually the chat box to answer whether each item is quantitative or qualitative, perhaps. For example, close-ended. Is it quanti or quali? Of course, that's quanti. Thank you. How about positivists? If we say positivists, is it quantitative or qualitative? Positivists. All right. Actually, these are technical terms we actually use for identifying whether a particular study belongs to a quantitative or qualitative side. Oh, so here's the answer to the items earlier. These are the terms under quantitative, and these are also the terms under qualitative. I can also see some familiar faces under me in 602 statistics. I believe some of them are also familiar with these terms, which I already also presented during my class. All right. Let us first begin with the importance of research because we still have to really anchor some terms needed prior to jumping theory generation. We have three stages or three steps under research. Of course, we have to pose questions. We collect our data to answer the questions that we have. And of course, we present an answer to the questions, whether it could be presented in many ways. Could be graphically, tabular, or descriptive way of presenting the questions. Are you familiar with that silhouette kind of picture? Of course, very much familiar. Senator Villar. She says in one of the posts, tigilan nyo daw ang research, nakakabaliw. Also, that actually trending siya no, because it became a meme in the social media. Now, I don't know if you agree with that with Senator Villar, but of course, as researchers, we are very much knowledgeable why research is really important, especially nowadays. Of course, first is it adds knowledge, it improves practice, and research informs policy. One particular example to add research is during the time of uh, VP Sara being the chair of the DepEd, that time, the DepEd has been striving hard in implementing its Matatag program. To answer research that adds to add uh, knowledge is that we really need to assess the effectiveness of its program using the best and appropriate qualitative research. Of course, there are many ways. There are many ways actually in really assessing whether the Matata program is effective or not. It depends actually on the objective of our study. You can actually use both you can actually use quantitative versus design to really assess the effectiveness of the MetaTag program, or if there is a best or appropriate qualitative design to really assess MetaTag program its effectiveness. And also if we really want to reach fusion of the two, we can use both mixed method. Later on, we will be dealing with some qualitative and quantitative design depending on the objective of the study, which one is best suited for a particular problem. Suggested improvement. Armed with research results, teachers and other educators become more effective professionals. Example scenario to add the research improvements is that in one of the state universities in the Philippines, they conducted a community extension program to their beneficiaries, which are the featured folks. The problem here is we really need to assess the impact of the extension program to the fisher folks and to the lives of their families, and we are to choose the best qualitative design and the appropriate evaluation model. Actually, though, if you reach na in your comprehensive exam, one particular topic there is you are just simply given a particular scenario, and it's really up to you whether to use a qualitative or quantitative research design to really answer that particular question. Of course, lastly, research informs policy debates. These are actually commonly used by our local government units, private sectors, and other mandated agencies to really form part of the information, to really form or to really make a research to inform policymakers, and or even a theory generation is part of this one. And now, in terms of doing qualitative and quantitative research, these are the commonly used processes, or the commonly used process or observed process used. Of course, we really need to identify our research problem, because without identifying, because the first question in doing research is what really is the problem? Why are you doing that research? Is there a problem that needs urgent solution? Of course, we really need to answer that particular question. First, we need to identify the research problem. Of course, it depends on the design, but the second step would be the literature review. It still depends on the design that you're using, especially for quality. The literature review is sometimes omitted, especially if you are doing phenomenological research design and qualitative, because introducing literature review in the pheno at first would introduce a bias in the first place. That's why sometimes in phenomenological research design under qualitative, literature review is done later part once we already have the results. Next, we have the research questions. Could be questions that are quantifiable, and those questions that are not measurable, are but questions pertaining to how. And then we need to identify the best and perfect research design under each mother research design. Could be under quantity or quality. And then once we already have research designs, these are divided into different sub-research designs under each mother design. We have quantitative, the combined or the mixed method, and we also have qualitative designs. In your case, some of you are working in Department of Education. I believe that there's a memorandum or circular order that you are required to do action research. Action research in this case, that you are really looking into a problem in your classroom setting that needs urgent solution within the classroom setting. That's when aware action research comes in. Of course, you're also familiar with experimental, correlation, and a survey. And the qualitative, these are grounded, ethnographic, narrative, and all the rest. There are a lot of qualitative designs depending on the objective of your paper. And then, of course, once we already have the research designs, we really need to go through sampling techniques, the computation of your sample sizes, and all the rest. We have then later on part, it's about not reporting. Now, these are the types of quantitative and qualitative research designs. For the quantitative research designs, we have experimental correlational survey, qualitative grounded ethnographic narrative. We also have pheno. Later on, I'll be presenting to you some other or some more qualitative research designs and quantitative research designs. We also have the mixed method and then the action research. Don't worry, the PowerPoint will be shared to whoever is your representative. Let's go to the types of quantitative research design. If you're familiar with the picture, these are the so-called marites in our barangay. If you're familiar with the word marites, marisol, and all those terms, informal terms used in our barangay, let me just yeah, human CCTV. Yeah, that's a good observation. However, we will not think of the negative side always in doing this in doing marites, because at some point you will realize that doing marites is already a form of research. Why? Because doing that, it's already a form of curiosity. While roaming around in your barangay, or while roaming around in your respective places, it's a form of observation actually. It is a matter of how really smartly convert the our behavior into research. Because research is a structured way of answering questions we already ask in our daily life. Just like the previous slide, just like the marites they're doing, from that actually casual conversations, we convert those informal conversations to a systematic and organized. Because what starts as informal curiosity can lead to formal studies using quantitative research or even qualitative research. Again, quantitative, of course, by the name itself, it's about quantifying, measuring things to prove the hypothesis and to produce a specific study. When to use quantitative, if we see to it that our variables are measurable, we will assess the impact of these variables on an outcome. We need to test theories or broad explanations and apply results to a large number of people. These are the types of quantity: survey research, descriptive, experimental, and correlational. I will not be dealing more of these each of the design, because I'll be focusing more of the theories, but I'll just run through lang some of my slides for the benefit of those who are not yet familiar with these types of quantitative research design. Under quantity, subcategories, major categories, we have experimental and non-experimental. Sorry. For the experimental, that is true experimental and quasi-experimental. Usually the quasi-experimental is commonly applied to those who are doing master's level. And non-experimental is descriptive, comparative, correlational, and survey. True experimental, just the difference of the two. True experimental is just you are doing random. There is a randomization of your variables. Quasi-experimental, you have not done any randomization in your respondents. And one example to that is in doing quasi-experimental is that in the depth setting, the sections are already established, which means to say that you have not done any randomization in selecting the students in this group or the section in this particular group, because the section is already established. That's why it's safer to use the quasi than the true experimental. All right. If I may just go directly with some parts of the slide, because I believe these are already familiar with you. Right. I may. All right. Let me just give you a sample of a paper that is a correlational. If you are to look into the abstract of the paper, it says quantitative under method. Under method, we have quantitative non-experimental method employing correlation approach used in the study. Actually, just a tip, in writing the method, because this is a common observation to some students who are doing thesis, they simply write under research design, they're simply writing this study is quantitative in nature. So it's not the best uh the best statement under the research design, because the quantitative and qualitative, these are mother designs, and then they have sub under designs, each design. For example, quanti under is non-experimental. Under non-experimental, we also have correlational, and under qualitative, the quanti and qualitative, these are all mother designs. So safer to mention first the mother design. For example, quantitative, this is the mother design. Non-experimental, still under quantitative. Then under non-experimental is correlational. So take note, under design, I have mentioned three: quantitative, experimental method, plus correlational approach. So we really need to complete the whole statement under research design. All right. The next slide is quite intriguing, because some of you, or most, or all of us, are even actually asking as to pila magid ay ang atong sample size, especially once we're doing thesis. Pila jud ka unsa ka dak-on ang ato ang sample size. The question is, how small is small and how large is large? This is actually one of the most debated concept in even in statistics. The way of gathering a respondents, how small our sample size is, or how large our sample size is. Sample size computation is the answer. Our goal is to have enough samples available to detect an effect, assuming it exists, without expanding more resources on an excessive number of samples. That's why, aside from doing census, complete enumeration, we do sample sizes, we do something. All right. If you're also familiar with this symbol or this formula, small n is equal to big N all over 1 plus big N times plus the plus e raised to 2. Actually, this is a Sloven. I don't know if some of you are using this formula, Sloven's formula, but take note that it is not proper to call it Slovens, because in the first place, Sloven did not derive it. And a Sloven is not even best to use, especially once we are doing thesis, because Sloven is very much appropriate once we have a very, very, very large population or sample size. Where there is no strict cutoff, a common rule of thumb is that if the sample is less than 5% of the population can be considered large enough that the finite population correction factor is not needed. Actually, this is part of the lesson under statistics that is quite technical, but in your end, let me just tell you that do not use the Sloven in the first place, especially once we are doing your thesis in the later part. Because the case here is this: if you have a population of 10,000, if you need a sample size of 100, this is 1% of the population. Since 1% is less than 5%, the population can be considered large. Now, if you have population of 500, if you need a sample size of 50, this is 10% of the population. Since 10% is more than 5%, the population is considered small, and the finite population correction factor should be applied. So this is quite technical, but let me tell you that once you're doing your thesis, you have your statistician to really guide you well, especially in doing computation. Now, if you have your laptop with you or a notebook with you, kindly search. We will not be doing this, but I'll just give you a overview lang of the G Power. You may download the G Power is a freeware, downloadable. Kindly search that in your Google. You can download the G Power app. This would better help you in computing your sample sizes. This is an application computing for your sample sizes depending on the statistical tests. For example, if you're doing a t-test, ANOVA, or whatsoever, the G-power would help you determine the number of sample size on the specific statistical test you have chosen. This is a free statistical power analysis program used for determining sample sizes and power analysis. Key features: user-friendly, diverse statistical effect size, and graphical output. These are commonly used, commonly tests found in the G-power. We have the t-tests, the ANOVA regression. We have the G-power would help us determine the sample size based on the desired power, effect size, and significance level. How to use the G-power. This is how G-power looks like once you have downloaded that in your respective computers or laptops. The test family here is where we can choose the kind of test or the kind of statistical test. For example, this is t-test for correlation point by serial model. We will also be choosing this one depending on the statistical test. Determine, we have the input parameters. We have here whether our study is one-tailed or two-tailed. And then next part is once we already have the inputted the values, the G-power would help us determine the sample size. For example, we have a t-test. We are to determine the mean differences between two independent mean groups, meaning two groups but independent. Here, if you have noticed, total sample size, we have 102. Here, the right side, sample size group 1, sample size group 2, total sample size. Since this is a t-test, we have to have a balanced number of respondents per group. And then the G-power gave us a total sample size of 102. So therefore, in your paper, in your study, you have to meet the minimum number of required sample size. Under your study, we have 102. So this is generally this is the overview or the general outlook of the G-power. Hopefully, by the end of the session, we'll be able to download the G-power. So you can go over with the software, practice, and explore some other features of the G-power, which I also believe that you can also apply this in your respective classrooms or classes, especially those who are handling our practical research 1 and 2. Right. Application. These tests, if a mean from one group is different from the mean of another group, whether groups are dependent or for a normal distributed variable. Let me just discuss this one because this is already a form of generating our own hypothesis. For example, the question is there a significant difference between the heart rate of patients before and after a run? We are to develop our own hypothesis, null hypothesis, meaning the key word here for the null hypothesis is no significant difference. And for alternative, we simply copy there is a significant difference because we are to test the null rather than the alternative hypothesis. And one-tailed or two-tailed, because two-tailed is non-directional, one-tailed is directional. If because that also depends on our description or our question from based on our hypothesis, because we also have to determine whether our study is directional or non-directional. So in this case, difference between heart rate patients before and after run. So which means to say that we are to determine whether it's a one-tail or a two-tail, whether directional ba siya or dili. A moment. All right. Let me just answer lang, Ma'am San, para dili na ako malimtan lang. Actually, once we do these kaning mga tests, because we have actually two kinds, non-parametric and parametric. Once we use the parametric, it is suggested to really use the probability sampling under the parametric, because in the event that we are using the non-parametric test, we will not be using the probability sampling, for example, the purposive, the quota sampling, the convenience sampling. These are under non-parametric. That's why we cannot use the t-test in this case, or for example, the ANOVA. Because the t-test, we assume the t-test, the ANOVA, we assume that our data are all normally distributed. If not, we convert or we divert to non-parametric test, and then that's the time that the non-probability sampling would come in. I'll also answer all the rest of the questions while we go through. Para dili lang malimtan. All right. Right. So actually, these are some overview of the G power. All right. Now, the question now, once we already have the problem, is to really decide on the appropriate statistical methods for research. What is the research question? This needs to be able to be defined on the most appropriate statistical techniques. Take note that any statistical software, including Microsoft Excel, will not tell you whether the test you use is correct or wrong. It gives you the figures anyway. What I mean here is you really have to consult your statistician other than self-diagnose. Do not self-diagnose, or we call it Dr. Quack, because in this case, even the SPSS, if you're familiar with SPSS, all the rest of the statistical software, the software will not tell you that the test you are using is incorrect or wrong, because once you have all the input now of your values in your software, it automatically that the software will automatically give you the figure or the result without even telling you that the test you're using is correct or not. For example, the test you use is independent t-test. The software will not tell you, oh, it's supposed to be dependent, not independent. So be careful in using the no problem with the software. Be careful in choosing the best statistical test for your paper or for your problem. That's why you really have to consult your statistician in this case. Now, the kind of design or method test is depending on the variable of your study, whether, of course, if it's normally distributed, of course we go for parametric tests. If the data is skewed, it's not normal, it's not bell shaped, that's why we convert our data from parametric to non-parametric. And this is a sort of summary whether what to use in your paper in the future. For example, we have comparing the averages of two independent groups. We really have to determine whether our dependent is an outcome variable or our independent is an explanatory variable. If our dependent variable has to be a scale measure or the data has to be in continuous level, and our independent is nominal or binary, we really need to use the independent t-test. However, if all the assumptions of normality are not met, that's why we convert our data into a Mann-Whitney test or Wilcoxon rank sum test. That's why do not always assume your data is normally distributed. We really have to determine our data first whether it's normal or not, because that's the purpose of introducing parametric and non-parametric test. If it's not normally distributed, if all the assumptions in normality are violated, that's why we convert our test into non-parametric test. Averages of 3 plus independent groups. If we are now comparing more than two groups, that is now where ANOVA comes in. If the assumptions of ANOVA are not met, that's why we convert into Kruskal-Wallis test. Do not worry if your paper is non-parametric test or parametric test, because we have no choice, because that's how our data is telling us that your data is normal or not. It's just a matter of how we scholarly discuss our paper. Next is we have the pair t-test. If it's not normally distributed, we convert it to Wilcoxon sign rank test, and all of the rest of the tests. If we are to test the relationship, we have the Pearson's correlation coefficient. If it's not normal, we have the Spearman's correlation coefficient and all the rest of the tests. Right. Now, these are some visual inspections of normality. If you have noticed, plotting histogram or a QQ plot of the variable interest will give an indication of the shape of the distribution. If you have noticed, the plot in the histogram is quite skewed. Also, the one here, kanina yung mga plot or points, this is the QQ plot to determine whether our data is normally distributed or not. All the indication here is most of the points dapat siya ni tungtong sa line. So dapat siya within or nasa sa line di siya ni tungtong ang itong mga points for us to be able to determine whether it's normally distributed or not. However, these are only visual inspections. The software would also give us a value for this normality plot. Now, these are commonly used normality tests. We have the Shapiro-Wilk and Kolmogorov-Smirnov. We have for independent t-test, this is how we check for normality. We check for the dependent variable by group, pair t-test, the difference of the two groups. So these are, sorry for the technicalities, but these are some of the normality tests we use in determining whether our data is normally distributed or not. Now, on your screen, we have here the commonly used statistical software for data analysis. This is for quantitative. We have SPSS, the Jamovie, the Microsoft Excel, the RStudio. Because SPSS here needs a license, though there's a crack for this one, but of course we advise our students or even researchers to really use the licensed one for the purpose of journal publication, because some of the journals are asking for a license number. Now, Jamovie is also a best friend to all statisticians. Very friendly, Jamovie. Actually, even non-statistics major or even not those who are not mathematically inclined can also use Jamovie, because this is a very friendly software. Even English majors can do this. Of course, Microsoft Excel and RStudio or R programming, the language is just a programming, so it's a quite technical and a bit very needs attention in doing analysis, especially when we're doing R. Now, this is how SPSS looks like. So I know some of you are familiar with the normality test using SPSS. Let me just go over with the software and let me show you sample the value of the normality test, which SPSS would give us in determining whether it's normal or not. This one. All right. Actually, those are some overview lang of the quantitative research design. And let me just go over with the qualitative research designs. We have the ethnography, the phenomenology, I believe some of you are quite interested in doing phenomenology and types of research. Let me just give you a glimpse lang of the how the networks is doing. However, all right, so let me just introduce lang some of the terms. The pheno here is, of course, I know some of you are familiar. The pheno here is, once we talk about lived experience, automatic siya pheno. Once we go for the ethnography, this is because we are studying a culture, we really need to immerse ourselves in the community. Though there are subcomponents under ethnography, we have autoethnography, we have nethnography, and ethnography is just a mother design under those sub designs under ethnography. We also have the case study, the grounded theory, historical research. Take note that do not be confused when to use the case study and phenomenology. In case study, we have multiple case studies. Actually, pheno live experience, because usually based on observation, Once you do the first question really there is, what really is the phenomenon? Why are you doing such thing? And why is it phenomenon? Why is it not case? Why is it not a case study? So be careful in not interchanging the two designs for your paper. All right. Let me just go over with the very meat of this symposium of this talk, introduction to theory generation and validation. Let me just give you a definition of the theory. Theory is a set of interrelated constructs referring to the concepts, definitions, and propositions that presents a systematic view of phenomena by specifying relations among variables with the purpose of explaining or predicting and controlling the phenomena. Right. Before I proceed, all right, before a moment. Doc San, what's on your screen, Ma'am San?
I see some numbers or statistical software, something, something like that.
Okay, okay, okay. Uh,
Publishing in
mm,
academic journal, something.
all right. Prior, before I discuss the theory generation or theory validation, let me just have your attention on this screen. This is very uh, this is very important in doing qualitative, though I have not discussed some of the parts of the qualitative, but this is very helpful on your end, especially your English teaching majors, especially what you are doing. Most of your work is more of literature review. All right. This is a still a downloadable freeware. I don't know with the noise, background noise. Anyway, all right. If you have noticed, I don't know if you are familiar with this one or quite new to everyone, but kindly have it downloaded on respective laptop or PCs. Kindly search publish or perish. This is under Harzing. Publish or perish. This is good for a systematic review or in doing literature review, especially in the stage now of doing your master's level, because some based on observation for those who are doing literature review, they are just simply copy then paste the what they have read, copy paste lang po silang paper. Well, in fact, it's not a way of how we do literature review, because literature review is not just simply copy and paste. It's not just simply reading. It's about synthesizing what we have read based on the literature review that we have, contextualizing what we have read, contextualizing that based on our study. So it's not about really merely reading at all. So kindly download publish repairs on your end. For example, here, if you have noticed, we have the Crossref, the Google Scholar, the Google Profile, and all. If you have noticed, we have the one asterisk, meaning the database is free. The papers are free from this academic database. We have the Google Scholar, still free. It's just the Scopus is under subscription depending on the organization. Let's just go over with the Google Scholar. This one. All right. Google Scholar, English language teaching. Let me just type lang English language teaching theory. All right. We also have the years. The year here is depending on the goal of our paper, whether we are up to the recency of the publication. For example, we have from 2020 up to 2025. All right. Sorry, but it would take some time. A moment. A moment. All right. Anyway, sorry for that technicality. This is actually one of the reality in doing live a moment. Right. Anyway, let me just go back na lang sa ako ang main screen. Some point murag ni ungot si publish repairs. Let me just go back lang later. Right. Under theory generation, we have two methods, whether it's inductive or deductive form of theory. Deductive in a way that we begin with what? Is it from general to specific or specific to general? What is your idea about deductive? General to specific or specific to general?
General to specific.
All right, thank you. And I'll be showing to you later uh, how to work with the deductive. So it's quite heavy for deductive and inductive form. But still, both can be done both in qualitative and qualitative research. Right. We have here the characteristics of a theory. Later on, I'll be showing, there's a workshop in the slide, which I don't know if we'll be able to accomplish the workshop. Hopefully. Characteristics of a theory, you have the abstractness. Concepts are independent of a specific time and place. Scientific statements must predict future events. They cannot be specific to past events. The independence of permits efficiency is understanding and predicting future. Thus, the statement, the greater the human capital investment, the greater the life chances, contains two abstract concepts. We have human capital investment and life chances. If we go back to that particular statement, this one, the greater the human capital investment, the greater the life chances. This statement can be used to derive and test a large number of related hypotheses. We can generate a lot of hypotheses based on a particular statement. First hypothesis, the greater the formal education, the greater the income. Second hypothesis, the greater the job experience, the greater the likelihood of promotion. Third, the greater the communication skills, the greater the job performance. Of course, since these are all hypotheses, we are to test each hypothesis, whether it's valid or not, so on and so forth. Actually, from one statement alone, we can derive a lot of hypotheses depending on the objective of our paper. Next characteristic of a theory is relevance. Empirical relevance refers to meeting two conditions of observations. Could be scientific theories must be falsifiable, or scientific theories must be supported by observations. Of course, whether we have already generated our own theory, whether it is valid or not, depending on the argument that we have earlier stated, or based on the empirical data that we have. Of course, we still have to validate whether the hypothesis that we have generated through empirical data, is it valid or not. Now, the idea of a theory could be induction, and deduction could be from specific to general, that is inductive, or from general to specific, it's deductive. Right. Let me just go over and direct your attention to the words proposition. Proposition, one abstract statement within a theory. For example, the greater the human capital investment, the greater the life is. And hypothesis is taken or based or anchored from proposition. For example, the greater the formal education, the greater the income. So actually, this is a domino effect. We still have to establish our actions. After we already have constructed our actions, we will construct our proposition, and then once we already have our proposition, then that's the time we have our hypothesis prior to generating our own theory. For example, proposition is quite abstract. Independent variable, the human capital investment, our dependent variable, life chances. Hypothesis is quite concrete compared to proposition. Formal education, dependent variable is income. Operation definition, years of formal schooling and total household income before taxes in 2007. In the next few slides, I'll be showing to you how to generate our actions and propositions in the context of English language teaching. All right. All right. Before I'll be presenting to you some theory in communicative language teaching, allow me to present first the workshop, which I don't know if this is visible. The following exercises aim to gauge how much of the basic concepts in this lecture you have absorbed and learned. There are three activities in this workshop. First is you state a theory in a field of study that you are interested in or has knowledge of. Second is state at least two propositions based on this theory. Third is state at least one hypothesis for every proposition that you have stated. I don't know if how this goes, Doc Mamsan, with the workshop.
We can try it via Google Doc, sir. I can make a Google Doc and then they get into the Google Doc if that's possible. Para matanaw lang nato how they are applying your inputs. And
Sure, sure.
this one is nakuha na gid no, the theory unya mo create sila propositions and hypothesis.
Later parts, si theory, Docsan, mag-una lang say proposition, hypothesis, and then out from the proposition and hypothesis, ana pa sila mo-create of theory.
Sige, sige. So what do you want me to create the Google Doc na now? I can share the link in the chat box.
Yes, Docsan. So meaning, share screen gihapon ng Google Docs para ma-visual na
Pwede ra,
kita
pwede ra.
gihapon.
Pwede ra.
Then,
Sige.
and then that's the time siguro we can have a water break for 3 minutes or so.
Yeah, it's all right. It's all right. So just give me the go signal. For now, I'll make lang sa the Google Doc.
Yes, Ma'am San. I'll stop presenting lang sa Ma'am San. Right, I'll be presenting lang sa some answers to the workshop. Then later on, you can do your own lang siguro. Make your own hypothesis and proposition. All right. All right. Based on the first workshop that we have here proposition hypothesis. Assuming that I already have constructed my own proposition, because this is now on the context of English language teaching. Hypothesis 1 derived from proposition 1. Students exposed to English reading materials one level above their current proficiency will demonstrate greater vocabulary gain than those exposed to materials at or below their level. Hypothesis 2 is English language learners in low anxiety classrooms will show significantly higher gains in listening comprehension compared to those in high anxiety classrooms. Take note that propositions are general statements, and then our hypothesis here is derived from the propositions. These are now specific because once we already have the actions here is these are non-debatable. Take note that the word actions, we assume that the statements that we have generated under actions are non-debatable. Once we already have constructed our actions, later on going through propositions derived from our actions, our propositions are general statements, and once we already have general statements, ang mahitabo sa atong hypothesis is that we are now constructing our own statements that are specific, testable predictions, and measurable. So take note that hypothesis is now a specific statement. Proposition is a general statement. Hypothesis is a specific statement. Once you have you have, for example, you have generated three propositions, then you also have to generate three hypotheses because each of these is subjected to validation. All right. I think I will stop for a moment under the generating hypothesis and hypothesis to based from your own proposition. So your task is going back. Your task is to specify a topic or a theory in your own field, state your own proposition, and state at least or depending on the number of propositions, then you create your own hypothesis. Then I'll be reading some of your answers through Google Docs with Ma'am San. Thank you. You can siguro take a screenshot of the workshop before I'll stop presenting my screen. For the deductive system, kato, we go with the process no with the theory construction. We have katong gibuhatan to ganihan existing lang si theory. So deductive method, of course, the principle ganiya is we specify the topic. Second is the assumptions and actions. Third is specify the range of phenomena. The fourth is specify the major concepts and variables. Fifth is specify the propositions, hypotheses, and relationships. And then third is we specify the theory na. All right, the first step is specify the research topic of interest. Existing theories and literature related to this topic should be identified and used as guidance for determining the nature and scope of the inquiry. Since knowledge is cumulative, the inherited body of information and understanding is take-off point for the development of more knowledge. So in your case, I believe you have there your specific topic na in your mind, especially leading towards research. So first is we specify the topic, which in your case is about English language teaching. So be specific lang of a particular topic under ELT. Examples, spread of communicable diseases, quality higher education, digital divide in developing countries, quality of life of a nation, and care of the elderly in developing and underdeveloped nations. These are some of the topics that need that later on atubuhatan of theory. Ang nakagood thing lang ni deductive method is that, di ba, if we are writing deductive method in a research paper, if deductive siya, the first part, the chapter 1 is about theory generation, which is independent siya sa imuhang validation. If you have constructed or generated na your own theory with the actions, the propositions, the hypothesis, yeah, later part na naka-theory, that paper, that chapter alone is publishable. Now, the second chapter would be the validation of your hypothesis, the proposition, and the theory. That chapter na pod is also an independent chapter, which is also publishable. So if you do deductive, the general statement here, Manggod, if we do paper nasa research is deductive axiomatic approach towards theory generation. Ang nakagood thing lang niya is ang two parts niya is independent, which are both publishable. So, matunga imong paper, so duha ang target. Next is, we specify the assumptions and actions. The actions here, these are actually statements that are non-debatable. For example, for the non-debatable, state care of the elderly in developing and underdeveloped nations. Iyahang mga actions based from the topic, developing and underdeveloped nations have fair to poor social services system. Developing nations prioritizes economic concerns and their national budget. Moreover, economic strategies adopted by these governments aim for productive employment. So these, take note how these statements are being generated or being crafted. The statements are, we assume that these statements are non-debatable. In deductive axiomatic approach, we always begin with the actions. These are the starting assumptions or self-evident truths within ourselves. So dili ta ka-debate sa ato ang statements based sa atong actions. They are accepted. Actually, take note of the word sa action ha. These are accepted without proof. Wala pati proof, but non-debatable, so we tend to accept what is being stated. Next is specify the range of phenomenon. For example, will the research and theories apply to people of the world or only to Filipinos or only to young Filipinos? Research or theories are more useful the greater the range of phenomena they cover, although the broader theories are more difficult to construct. So take note, moratag sa research basic sa basic research pa, we set our inclusion and exclusion criteria sa ato ang study. So in the deductive axiomatic approach, we specify the range as to the scope of the theory we generate. Fourth step is we specify the major concepts and variables. And a moment. Next is we have done this so far, the proposition hypothesis. The proposition is a statement about one or more concepts or variables. Just as concepts are the building blocks of propositions, the building blocks of the theories. So kato ganiha, matutong gibuhat katong propositions and hypothesis from the axioms which is the axioms nga non-debatable. Then say proposition gikan derived from axioms, general statement, and our hypothesis derived from propositions which are specific, testable, and measurable. Right. The final step in the deductive method is the theory generation. The theory may be a corroborated or revised existing theory or a newly constructed theory, which in your case, para siya challenging sa part kay nag-axiomatic naman kita, deductive axiomatic, why not? We generate our own theory kay para mayingon tag Gador's theory stated that inga na siya kay para natin theory later on kay once validated, then our own theory can also be used by other researchers we generated naman our own theory, validated pud siya, so that our theory can also be used by other researchers as well. Again, theory is the result of relating the various assumptions and assumptions derived. The axioms and assumptions contain variables. So later on, this one. So these are the suggested format for deductive studies, deductive axiomatic approach, because this is the purpose. One research design that is one research design nga pwede na ito magamit once we are doing masters. I don't know if CTU would accept the design, but it's really more of the theory manggod. So why not? Kay sayang manggod ang nature, but it's not always, I tell you, it's not always doing experimental, doing t-test, doing ANOVA and all. These are more siya mao lagi commonly kind of paperwork or thesis ang atong masugatan once we do master's level. Why not we explore more of other research designs? Kay this is the purpose of the rest of the designs. If dili gamit ng pakatulgod lang, then maway gamit ang ato ang gidiscuss karon if we will not use this one, especially in the context of the ELT, English Language Teaching. You can explore a lot more of the research designs and deductive axiomatic or deductive approach kay usa lang sila pod nga mga powerful nga designs nga pwede magamit sa atong thesis. Chapter 1, overview of the study. More of the take note the deductive axiomatic sa pag first palandaan, theory generation. This is more of literature review, systematic review. No empirical data yet because we are still generating our own theory. Later na tabag empirical data once we validate our own theory. Chapter 2, review of previous studies and accepted principles. Chapter 3 is theory formulation. Chapter 4 is theory and verification and validation, and after which, summary and conclusion. So sa chapter 3, chapter 4, pwede siya or even chapter 2, pwede siya independent studies which are publishable. Next is the inductive methods for theory development. Inductive meaning from specific to general. Bali na sad siya. Later on, I'll be showing to you some samples of studies that employed inductive and deductive method. Here are some steps in doing inductive method this time. First is we select a topic of interest, identify key factors and variables that may be discovered in reading through various studies on the topic. Third is we gather the data either through internet or survey without any hypothesis in mind. Take note, inductive man siya, wala ta hypothesized, no actions, no propositions, because the empirical man ta data daan, so later part na mo gawa si theory anchored on the empirical data that we have. Next is data mining na sa pag towards theory generation, and then we formulate our testable hypothesis. All right. If I may stop screen. All right, let me show you lang some sample. A moment. All right. Right. Kanilang. If I may siguro if permission lang ha not to or ako lang inundahan nga ay nasa do not take a screenshot lang sa paper because this is submitted pa for publication ano yan basin wala pa siya magawas pero still underway para for kuan na siguro protection purposes, but this is a theory generation nga part. All right. This is a paper, Bridging Academic Communities Through Higher Education Extension Programs in the Philippines. I did meta-analysis toward theory generation. Nahitabo there, this is an inductive approach of theory generation. So ang mahitabo, since this is qualitative nga paper, if I may, this one, ang mahitabo niya is, di ba, I have shown you the publisher Paris software. This is how it looks like the underreporting apart. So once we already have determined the number of studies sa ato ang database registered or from publisher Paris, for example, I have already have 13 studies, right? Since this is a qualitative meta-synthesis, this is a thematic analysis, na siya theme. So once you already have the themes, meaning inductive siya, nag-una ta sa data na mismo, na natay mga themes, ara pa ta mo come up og possible nato nga theory. Theory generation. This section presents a theory generated from the emergent themes. The resulting theory addresses the theoretical gap in existing body of knowledge and offers a foundation for policy recommendations, both of which align with the overarching goals of meta-synthesis. Theory generated, this one, transformative community empowerment theory, TSET, through higher education extension programs. The baseline or ang basis nako sa pag-come up with theory are anchored on the themes I have generated. So, na data daan, wala ta nag-hypothesize because empirical data atong gibasihan. So, we have come up with a theory. A theory actually is you name your own theory and you specify the description of your theory. For example, the transformative community empowerment theory posits that sustained, inclusive, and meaningful academic community partnership are achieved when higher education extension programs are designed and implemented around 5 interdependent pillars. Kato siya based on the themes. Then, murag, for me, it's medyo laborious siya nga part. Ang laborious nga part si inductive, I mean si deductive approach compared to inductive because naka bugat sa trabaho ni nakabugat sa trabaho ni deductive is more of the systematic review, more of the readings of the literature review. And this time, I'll be showing to you a full sample paper o guide lang siguro on the, especially on the validating the theory na. For example, this we are now into the validation nga part na sa theory. Validating the theory of communicative language teaching, CLT. I don't know if this is existing. Validation of the communicative language teaching theory approach in improving students' oral communication and skills in senior high schools in ESL classrooms. So our topic, di ba, deductive man siya. So our topic is kani siya, CLT, in improving the students' oral communication skills in senior high school ESL classrooms. Now, based on the second step, we specify our actions that are non-debatable. Communication is both the means and the goal of language learning. Language learning requires interaction and negotiation of meaning. The third action is language use precedes conscious grammar, knowledge, and communicative context. Just a note lang, the sequence we go for with the actions. Second is we go for the preposition and then hypothesis. Take note, actions non-debatable. Example, learning is an active process. Of course, we always go with a starting assumption that without proof and non-debatable. Of course, learning is an active process. After which, from the action generated, students who actively engage in tasks learn better than passive listeners. More specific, I mean, a general statement taken or derived from action, and then from that proposition, we tend to specify, we tend to have a statement that is testable. Students who participate in interactive speaking activities twice a week will have a higher speaking proficiency scores than those who do not. Nga na siya how we construct our own hypothesis. Testable, measurable twice a week. Take note of the variables or the terms we use in the statement. Summary, actions, propositions, hypothesis, foundation of theory, describe relationships among constructs, predict outcomes for testing, and the third step is we specify the range of phenomena, whether unsa ang gitanaw sa ato ang topic. For example, oral communication, is it more of the fluency, accuracy, or interaction? We specify more the range, whether it could be in context of the topic or it could be a specific setting as to where we will conduct our study. This one, impact of communicative learning theory in SL senior high school contexts, specifically in the Philippines, because ang tendency, we may be able to generate our own theory, but it's not generalizable to all other or to some other countries. Okay, because our setting is in the Philippines, so that's the time that we set up a range in our in our theory now, or even in the topic. Major concepts, kani. All right. In terms of validating the theories, we one moment. Ano eh. In the last step, prior to validating the theory, here's a sample theory lang. Communicative language teaching theory. In ESL, secondary education, instruction grounded in communicative language teaching, characterized by task-based, student-centered, and interaction-focused learning, enhances students' oral communication skills by fostering real-life language use, reducing speaking anxiety, and promoting meaningful classroom interaction. Now, how do we validate this theory? We have here our empirical support. We do post-test speaking courses in CLT. We can do quali. We do experimental, whether improving budget and speaking skills sa mga students. We do testing, experimental phase, experimental pre and post. We also do qualitative method, observing the classes, taking down notes based on observations. First is how do we validate our theory above? We have here and see oral fluency ang atong gitanaw, oral communication. We have here some other parts or other tools used for a developing or validating the theory that we have. Quantitative, kato pwede ta mag pre-test and post-test for speaking or writing. We can do standardized rubric. We can do survey questions, engagement, anxiety, and participation depending on the variables that we have specified earlier on. We also have a qualitative tool, pwede na to mag-cross triangulate, validate, interview protocols, classroom observation, and reflective journals. And then for the ano ka challenging nga po nga part once we do the survey questionnaires, of course we need to go through validity, different types of validity. Could be content expert siya nga part, or dapat bagod validated ang atong instrument, or even if we opt not to use the standardized rubrics, we can have our own but still subject for validation part. This one. Design the study, choose an appropriate research design depending on the goal, purpose, kato siya ganiha, katong if CLT versus traditional, murag mag-oral traditional testing of the oral fluency of the students, meaning traditional way of method compared to the communicative learning theory na nga atong nanatay scaffold nga gamiton, could be comparing the performance of the students quasi experimental, then interviews, observations pwede sa qualitative, or we can combine both para mas kaya atong purpose once we already have the qualitative to quanti, which is exploratory, quanti to quali, explanatory, ang gamit niya if ang atong quali to validate the quanti, or the quali or the quantity would validate the quality that we have. That's the purpose of combining the two research designs. Right, conduct the research in real world classrooms. Kato siya, we go for a real app setting. We collect before and after data for the pre-test and post-test. Actually, in validating a theory, do not limit yourselves in doing just a simple one design lang. Maingon lang ka nga mag pre-post ko para ma-validate a theory. It's not enough. You still have to go through a lot of research designs, because we're not just simply testing or validating the theory, but of course we go through validating as well the hypothesis and the propositions that we have. So it's a laborious work, but still, ang end part niya is still a validated regional theory. Use triangulation, we could be quantitative plus quantitative data to strengthen the findings. Here are some of the statistical tests to use, which I believe ang murag ang trend karon is the SEM, the structural equation modeling. I don't know if you are familiar with the term, but mura siya ingon ani ang iyahang murag the trend now is using the SEM. SEM is one of the validation techniques sa pag-generate sa pag-validate sa ato ang theory. Qualitative, thematic analysis, and we also have katong you can use a lot of qualitative designs depending kapon sa goals sa atong paper. How to check whether the theory is validated? Does the data support the propositions, hypothesis, of the theory? Because in the next chapter, chapter 2, atong bahaton is pag-validate not just the theory alone, but we have to validate each proposition and each hypothesis. If yes, theory is validated in your context. If partially, consider refining the theory, identifying limitations. If no, we need to reevaluate assumptions, consider alternative explanations. Siya. Ito ganiha, example, CLT. Atong gigamit is we do the mixed method, we do pre-post plus the interview, and depending gihapon if pwede nato siya sudlan pag yung other research design, both quali and quanti. For the results, CLT group had significantly higher fluency and lower anxiety. So based from the method that we used, mixed method, based sa ilahang quanti nga result, pag pre-post na to plus validated through interview, na ay improvement sa ilang fluency o katong ni-lower lang anxiety, then that's the time we can say that our theory is validated. So it's a long process, kay murag nag-general maguta pa dun sa specifics, but still worth it na iyahang output once we already have the validated our own theory. Right. All right, give me a minute to find another file. This is more of the deductive nga part. Akong gi-present ganiha atong kuan more siya inductive to siya nga part. All right. So this is sample of a paper that is using a deductive axiomatic approach, a theory on academic health research utilization. This is not yet a theory. This is the topic, health research utilization. So ang hitabo is in the chapter 1, we specify, we begin first, of course, a rationale of the study, and then rationale, then later part na si theory generation. Under theory generation is, this is more of a literature review, systematic review. Ang tabo niya is, from the literature review, nati action nga na-create, the academe and the healthcare institutions have respective health research agenda that is supported by the rest of the literature reviews. Then after which, nag-construct na po tayo another action. Health research agenda are formulated through consultations with the health research stakeholders, the absence of which confines the agenda within the specific institution. Now, based from the action 1, the proposition 1 was established. A strong disconnect exists between the academic health research production. So ang tendency niya, natay action 1, proposition 1. We also have a action 3, another na po na siya nga proposition, action, another actions, depending on the how rich our literature review is. That's the time nga we develop a lot of actions and propositions. And based from the theory, based from the actions and propositions, yung theory na generate is that a strong disconnect exists between the academic health research production of the higher education institutions and the research utilization. It's a general statement of the theory. And that's, yeah. So that's the first part of the deductive approach. Moment. This time, ang chapter 2 na niya is on validating na the theory. So, another problem. Kana siya. Ang iyang method, look at the method na siya gitawag nga interview para ma-validate to ang iyang gibuhat nga proposition. Let me just go over with the paper until such time nga na-validate ang iyang theory. So nga na yung example, kaning mga vignettes niya or mga verbatim statements, this is one qualitative design to support whatever is being generated based on the actions and propositions. Right. And I believe or I think, Ma'am San, that ends my presentation.